Γεια σας, καλησπέρα. Με λένε James. Μιλάω στην Αθήνα, μαθαίνω ελληνική και σιγά σιγά. And thank you for your patience. I'm going to do the rest of this in English. But I very much appreciate being asked to be here and to be part of today. I'm a writer and I'm an artist and I'm a person who works a lot with technology, mostly to think about its impact on our lives, on our society, on our politics. I've been living in Greece for about 4 years now, and one of the results of that, I think, is that I also think a lot more today about the impacts of technology on our environment and on the planet. And I'm going to talk about some of those things now. One of the technologies I've been fascinated for a while is artificial intelligence. Because for me it's kind of emblematic of where we're trying to go with technologies, to build things that are ever more smarter, ever more powerful, but also kind of ever more remote from us. I think there's something very interesting about the fact that as a society at present we seem obsessed with creating a technology that will, if successful, essentially beat us, which is how most people have kind of encountered contemporary debates and examples of artificial intelligence in the present. This is how we're building it, basically. This is a good example. This is Google's DeepMind, the famous game of Go from a few years ago against the Korean Go master Lee Sedol, which was the first time that an artificial intelligence beat a master-level human at this kind of fiendishly complicated game. And it was really quite interesting watching this kind of play out, because for me it embodied all of the kind of contradictions around what it is that we're making technology for. And a couple of super interesting things happened as part of this game. Partly, it's becoming increasingly difficult in one sense to tell the difference between kind of machines and humans. The worlds seem to be merging. Before it played Lee Sedol, AlphaGo, under a fake name, under the name Master, in fact, played hundreds of games online against human players to learn their skills, to learn how to beat them, until it evolved beyond playing just humans, until it was good enough just to play itself. Thousands and thousands, if not millions more time, and evolve into a system that was essentially completely unbeatable by humans, which is where we're kind of at today. There was an extraordinary moment in the Lee Sedol game when AlphaGo played a move. The first 2 games in this 5-game series had been quite evenly matched. But in the 3rd game, AlphaGo played a move that initially the commentators and everyone watching thought was a mistake. It was something so bizarre, so unseen before, that they were like, the computer has made some weird error. And it was only kind of 10, 15 moves later that they started to see that this wasn't a mistake. This was a move that's now known as the God move in Go history, because it was so extraordinary, so powerful, so kind of, it completely blew the rest of the game out the table, and it instantly won from the moment of this play. But what's super interesting to me, and this is where the question of uncertainty really comes to the fore in this, is that it's not just that the machine made a move that was so extraordinary that it was completely, untouchable by humans. It's that we'll never understand why the machine made that move. Because the way that we're developing this thing we call artificial intelligence today, which is something we're still even struggling to describe properly, but is essentially forms of computation so advanced, so complex, that the human mind can't really get around them, and that we'll never know what thought process went into playing this move and this game. And I find something that I suddenly find, as someone who loves technology, is interested in it, works with it all the time, I found something profoundly sad in that moment, of realizing that essentially we've kind of locked ourselves out of this domain of experience. And I wonder what the impulse to do that is, where that comes from, and also crucially how that plays out in the rest of our world, in the rest of society, in politics, and as I said, the planet. Because the decisions that we make around technology in that way affect kind of everything else as well. And in particular, they're affecting stuff here in Greece, which is something I particularly wanted to talk about today. So this is Epirus, where I was fortunate to be a few times this year. I went for the first time just at the end of last year. I presume quite a few other people in here have been to Epirus, who has been or to this part of the world or to northwestern Greece, and would agree with me that it's possibly one of the most beautiful places in the world. Wave your hand, you put it up if you agree with that. Good, I'm seeing lots of nice waving hands. I was completely blown away by this place. I mean, you know, I met some friends there, we went down, we sat by the side of this lake. The sun was setting, the mountains were kind of glowing green and brown. It was the beginning of the year, so there's still some snow up there. It's so peaceful. One of the people pulled out a clarinet and started playing kind of Epirot music, which is incredibly beautiful. And the frogs in the lake were answering, and it was kind of the most idyllic scene of kind of unspoiled beauty you could possibly imagine. And then I went for a walk kind of in the woods behind, and what I found was these things. As I walked around these woods around the lake, I kept finding these wooden stakes that had been driven into the ground with little kind of plastic tags attached to them, and letters and numbers handwritten on them like this. And this is what my friends in Epirus had actually brought me to see. These are the markers of a huge grid that stretches for thousands and thousands of kilometers across Epirus, across northwestern Greece, in fact all the way down the western coast, and in fact out to sea as well. These are markers of a seismic exploration program to try and find extractable deposits of oil and gas. If you don't know about this program, what is essentially happening is approximately a third of Greek land and sea has been parceled up, demarcated for sale to oil and gas companies to see if they can extract oil and gas from it. And what they've done is they've drawn this kind of huge grid over the territory in order to perform seismic exploration to kind of see and find what's there. What that looks like on the ground is this. At each of the points at which that grid crosses, they dig a 20-meter hole, they put explosions in it, and set it off like this, which creates the vibrations so they can use essentially kind of like underground radar to see what's there. In Epirus alone, they're covering 4,000 square kilometers. Each 1,000 kilometers of that involves digging 11,000 holes like this. This is tens upon tens of thousands of seismic explosions, and this is just the exploration phase. Right? This is just the bit they do before they actually come in and start digging, bringing in bigger machines and digging for oil. And what does this have to do with AI? Because it does. Well, it turns out, and I was finding this out like as I was walking around the woods, which was a very weird feeling. I was kind of Googling the companies involved. So the company that's got the rights for Epirus is called Repsol, big Spanish energy company. And it turned out they've got they've had a kind of 10-year program with IBM. They have a separate program with Google to develop very advanced artificial intelligence, specifically for finding and exploiting oil reserves. They're developing programs that are capable of going through these kind of huge amounts of data in order to better allow them to do this work of extracting oil. So it was this really weird moment of like standing in the woods and looking at these pieces of wood stuck into the ground, and suddenly realizing that these aren't just kind of wooden stakes. This is artificial intelligence. These are kind of like the claw marks of a fully functioning AI, like moving through the world in this way. Which is someone who spends a lot of my time trying to visualize what technology looks like so we can understand it better and kind of think about it better. It was a very powerful moment. And it's weird because actually oil and gas, we've known about oil and gas existing in Greece for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Herodotus wrote in 400 BC about the oil seeps in Zakynthos, which you can still visit today. It's where oil kind of naturally bubbles up from under the ground. They used to use it to tar the boats to make them waterproof. The same, this is also close to that lake. This is just below the village of Dragopsa in Epirus. I was walking along the river with my friend here who was showing me, And as we came around the corner, this bend in the river, suddenly there was this like amazing smell of gas, like a pipe had broken. It was kind of really weird. You kind of thought that something had gone wrong, but this is actually, again, a natural oil and gas seep. There's a place in which, well, there's many places where there's enough of this stuff under the ground, kind of seeping up, for you to actually even be able to smell it without any exploration done. And in fact, even in the 1940s, when the Italians invaded, they tried to dig here to take the oil for the war effort, and you can still find buildings that they built on the hills above and mine shafts that they dug to try and get at this oil and gas before they were pushed back. And now we're trying to do it again. Because the thing is, you don't need like an AI to find oil and gas in Greece, but you do need the AI to exploit it, which is where this kind of huge use of kind of data and complex decision-making systems comes into play. We're using these kind of incredibly advanced technologies to get more oil and gas out of the ground, which I don't know if you guys have heard of things like climate change. Seems to be absolutely the opposite thing that we should be trying to do with our technologies at the present. The absolute opposite thing of what we think technology should be doing for us, which is taking us to a better, safer, healthier, more just and equitable place in the future. And instead, we're using it to pull more fossil fuels out of the ground, to burn them with all the damage that that's going to do. So there's a weird, odd story that's kind of told often about the dangers of developing artificial intelligence. And it goes like this. Imagine you design an artificial intelligence to maximize the production of paperclips, right? Something super simple. You've got a paperclip factory, you want better paperclips, so you think, I know, we'll have an AI and it'll make the paperclip factory better. And it starts by doing so. You know, it can kind of move the machines around, it tells you where to place things, it kind of, you know, makes the supply chain look a little better, kind of puts workers in the right place, or even just kind of automates the entire thing, because basically humans just get in the way of this kind of process. But you realize that actually, like, the AI, all it wants to do is get more paperclips. And so it starts to kind of go beyond the factory as well. Obviously, it's connected to the internet because it's an entirely digital thing. So it starts to like work on the stock market. It starts to operate, you know, buying paperclip futures or buying other metal companies that might supply the paperclip factory. All, of course, just to make paperclips better, right? We just want more paperclips. That's all the AI wants to do. But it's not really thinking, or it can't think, about anything else that's going on around it. And so it starts to, you know, buy mining companies as well and get more involved into the production of metals as well, until basically everything in the world becomes more and more materials for paperclips. Whether it's the metals that are left in the ground, whether it's the materials of buildings we can tear down and feed into the giant paperclip machine, or whether it's kind of the bodies of our cells, which have some iron in them, so we might as well turn those human bodies into paperclips as well. And this goes on until the entire planet has been turned into paperclips. We build paperclip spaceships and take off to turn other you know, planets into paperclips as well. This is a weird and strange and slightly terrifying but also ridiculous story until you realize that what the AI wants isn't paperclips. What the AI wants is oil. We've built a system that is intending to kind of feed upon itself, to continually feed itself oil, because oil is needed for the computation itself to run on, for the contemporary society we've built to continue to function as we've built it. It needs to kind of continually search out and build more oil infrastructure, build more infrastructure like this that, as we know, is damaging us and the planet in very, very intense and powerful ways. And what I thought was a story about artificial intelligence turns out, as usual, when I dig into technologies like this, to be broader discussions about what it is about the society that produces these kinds of technologies, that seems to be hell-bent on damaging certain things with an incredibly narrow focus on producing certain things. Not paperclips, but oil is what's required to keep this machine going. I give a lot of talks about artificial intelligence. And people often ask me, like, when is AI going to be here? When we're actually going to have artificial intelligence? Which is a complicated question, because it depends what do you mean by AI. Most people mean giant robots. And basically, giant robots is kind of what this is about. If you understand robots as things that function broadly and powerfully and are more powerful than us as individual humans. But the answer I quite often give when people ask me, when is real AI going to turn up? I say, real AI is already here. It's corporations. Corporations are large assemblages of people and machinery and infrastructure connected to networks. They respond to pleasure and pain. Pleasure is profit and loss is pain. They operate according to very narrow views about what it is that they should be doing. They stick to these very narrow goals, almost regardless of anything else that happens. They have free speech, they have legal standing, they have legal personhood, they have power in courtrooms. They're very hard to kill, although not completely impossible to do so. They are essentially life forms that we've created where we realize that having had these kind of organisms living amongst us, it's almost like living in the aftermath of a kind of alien invasion. Where the corporations are at large, kind of on the planet, performing these kind of goals with us stuck somewhere in the middle. And that's a really terrifying realization for me, to realize that actually that is our vision of what intelligence looks like, just as that's our vision of what technology looks like. It's this incredibly narrow vision, whereas, at the beginning I said that artificial intelligence, when we see it played out in something like Go, is nothing like human intelligence. Well, it's realizing it's something actually more like a kind of corporate intelligence, this kind of rapacious intelligence that wants to extract all possible resources and leave kind of nothing for the rest of us. What's happening up in Epirus is absolutely terrifying. Epirus, as sure you all know as well as I do, is the source of something like 70 to 80% of the country's water, fresh, clean water, which will be irrevocably damaged by the oil drilling. This oil drilling is also going on in places like the Hellenic Trench, which is home to the most important Mediterranean site for sperm whales, for example. It's planning to happen in the wetlands, in Messalongi and Ambrovikas. It's going to irrevocably destroy places which have been kept in trust and secure for nature for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And it seems to be happening because we're incapable of thinking of ways of engaging with the world that are not based on a form of intelligence that involves essentially conquering others, conquering space, extracting more and more, whether that's playing a game of Go and winning it, or whether it's extracting all available oil. Because let's be really clear about this. We know what the result of drilling in these places is going to look like. It's going to look something like this. This is a Repsol site, the same company that's drilling in Epirus. This is one of their sites in Spain. When you pull oil out of the ground, it goes everywhere. And when you burn it, it poisons the entire planet. So if there's one thing you take away from today, please, please, please look up Save Epirus, look up Waters of Greece, and if you're not familiar with it or you know people who are not familiar with what's happening, please speak to them, because this is a really, really supremely important fight. And that's my main thing that I'd like to communicate today. The other thing is that technology doesn't have to be this way, and because technology doesn't have to be this way, nothing we do has to be this way. These debates around what's called technological determinism, the idea that because we have these technologies, this is the way we should do it, they simply don't work that way, and there's amazing counterexamples everywhere. The example I started with of the computer system that, designed to beat humans, we've been here before. This is Gary Kasparov playing IBM's Deep Blue back in 1997. And what happened here was that you had this amazing moment where the machines came along, we built this whole machine to win at chess. And it did. And Gary Kasparov, the greatest human chess player, lost to it. But something interesting happened after that, which is the next year Kasparov came back to competitive chess with a new form of chess. He called it advanced chess. And it was where humans and computers played together alongside one another. And it turns out, not only does that open up entirely new forms of play, more interesting types of chess and games became possible, but human-computer teams turned out to be able to beat the best supercomputer. right? So something amazing happened when instead of treating these pressures, whether they're human technological, human political, or human social, in all kinds of ways, that collaboration, even within this sphere, turned out to be better than pitting the two sides against one another. Other ways of thinking through these various technologies are possible. And even for me, the very idea of intelligence itself is something that we can rethink in the present moment. At the moment, we're building forms of technology and forms of infrastructure whose idea of intelligence is so horribly limited, that are based on forms of aggression, forms of extraction, and forms of domination that will prove our undoing. They will prove the undoing of places like Epirus and elsewhere, but they'll prove the undoing of the entire planet. And yet at the same time, we spent the last 10 to 20 years realizing that intelligence exists in different forms all around us. In fact, the latest scientific research shows, it's extraordinary stuff. The intelligence of plants, for example, the communications that are happening constantly in the natural world around us that we're barely even aware of. So my message to you is that every time you hear about things like artificial intelligence, question whose intelligence and what intelligence is at work. Every time you hear that something is inevitable or impossible to achieve, remember that these things are entirely within our grasp, that we develop these technologies, design and think them for ourselves. And when you hear that there is nothing that we can do to change the course of history, of exploitation, of what's happening here and elsewhere in the world at present, remember that collaboration, that mutual support, that care and empathy for one another is the one and only thing that ever has. Thank you very much.